So I am absolutely delighted to be joined by our very esteemed panel. This is really looking at careers in marketing, in communication, and that kind of area. We've also, of course, got Amanda Conway here, our resident careers guru, who just knows everything there is to know about all the different roles that you can do with your psychology degree. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to start straight away, and we're going to move to our first speaker. So, speakers, if you just tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got there in a couple of minutes. Suraj, over to you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you very much. Bear with me, I've got a bit of a sore throat, so if my voice goes funny, that'll be why. But yeah, in terms of what I do, I'm the head of marketing for a tech scale-up in the aviation industry. And essentially they help airlines, airports, and interplane companies, which are essentially companies that refuel planes, track and report on their fuel usage. So very relevant in today's world with the need to cut carbon emissions. In terms of how I got there, so did a degree in psychology, and after that, I had no idea what I wanted to do. No idea. I didn't know I was going to go into marketing or anything like that. I saw an opportunity to. There was a scholarship going for a master's in business, and it was a practical master's. It was at MMU, and applied for it, got it, and that involved a bunch of placements throughout. So alongside placements, we did a lot of coursework and worked towards getting that master's. The practical side of it, though, is what I would say was just as important, if not more important, than the learnings from the theory. So one of the placements was an arts charity called Walk the Plank. Another was a company called Manchester Confidential, which is like food and drinks and events, and that sort of thing. There was a placement at dabs.com, which is now the BT Group. And then my final placement was at Betfred as an online marketing assistant. So that last one, managed to work over in Gibraltar, where they have a head office there, learned a lot about the business, and then came back and worked in their marketing team, very small marketing team at the time as well. The team I was working, the function I was working in particular was the affiliate marketing function, which is very much working with other smaller businesses to promote your product, essentially affiliate marketing. After that, the guy who owns Betfred, his name is actually Fred Doan. He decided, why not create my own marketing agency and serve all of my other businesses as well. So I got headhunted and moved across to head up the marketing comms function of that business. Grew rapidly over the 5 years that I was there. So ended up going from a team of just 3 of us to about 300 when I left. Left to go traveling with my partner, who is actually a historian at the University of Manchester. So we traveled around the States, and then came back and started working for a digital marketing agency that run campaigns for thousands of small businesses. So I was actually, it's a bit sort of bit weird, but I was an in-house marketing team for a marketing agency. So I was doing all of their B2B marketing, trying to acquire new business. And you can imagine, working with 60 other marketers running a B2B campaign. Everybody thinks that they know marketing, and it's an absolute nightmare. But it was a great time. And in terms of one of the key achievements of that was negotiating a deal with Google and Amex, where they both had to promote our products essentially as a premier partner of both of theirs. So that was really cool. Getting to go to Google's offices every now and again, and merging that relationship with American Express. And then got the job about 7 months ago for this tech company. Very sort of innovative. The whole point is to try and help airlines and the aviation industry decarbonize through digitalization. So that's where I am.
It sounds incredibly, it sounds like an incredible portfolio. and you're still very young, and it's quite impressive that you've managed to do all of these different things, and that each one has kind of propelled you in some way onto the next one. So it's a really nice narrative. If we move over to James, then do you want to tell us about yourself and where you are and how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. I'm James Sallows. So I am the Global Head of Transformation and Capability. I have to draw breath before I say my job title now. So Global Head of Transformation and Capability for CBIA, which is Consumer Business Insights and Analytics at GSK Consumer Health. So we can talk about what that means, I think, probably to go through the questions. So I actually studied in Manchester as well. I was actually at the MMU at the business school. I did a European Business and Languages degree. And as part of my degree, I had a year abroad. So I was in France, and I had to do an industrial placement. And I took out that industrial placement was at a small startup in Paris of 6 people who were actually the first company to do online market research in Europe. They're now part of Harris Interactive. So I started out there. I was very fortunate. They said they'd wait for me to get my master's and finish, and offered me a job when I'd finished it. So I went back to join them and lived there. Working a lot in kind of the startup online area of research, which was growing very, very fast. Then I worked actually in Kantar as part of WPP for about 9 years. So looking after the research needs of what then was Millward Brown Research International Added Value, which is all now under the Kantar group. And then from there, I was actually responsible for launching kind of the online business and online research and creating new products, especially for media agencies. So how can we better understand people and how they're interacting with media. And then from there, I joined the other biggest group in the sector, which is Ipsos, where I was responsible for relaunching their sort of copy testing, ad testing products, making them faster to market and more adapted to online. And then I had a stint actually as a managing director of a small business launching again an online division, which was specialized in the medical sector, called the Schlesinger Group, looking after offices in Germany, France, Spain, and the UK. And then from there, I actually became chief insight officer for one of the big media agencies, which is IPG Media Brands. So essentially the guys who are out there buying the media space where your ads appear and working out who, what, where, when, who you're targeting at what times. And kind of managing their teams through a big transition as the business was kind of consolidating across agencies. And then similar to Suraj, I went traveling. So we're finding some good links there. I went traveling with my 18-month-old daughter and my wife. We took some time out and we did a round the world trip with an 18-month-old, which was brilliant. And I think we realized just the right time. Later or earlier would have been a lot more difficult. And then when I came back, I actually joined GSK. So GSK, consumer health business, basically all of the products from GSK that you can buy in your supermarket or over the counter. So Voltarol, Sensodyne, Corsadil, there's a whole range, hundreds of products that you can buy. And right now we're splitting into 2 businesses. We're splitting away from the pharmaceutical side. So a very interesting time where the role of insights is changing for the better. And understanding people is the core of what we're trying to do, designing a new insights function. And that's what I'm pushing at the moment as our agenda, which is really how is insights changing? What does the future look like? And how are people actually going to be the difference and not data as we move forwards?
Again, thank you for such a concise summary. And again, really interesting stuff. If you've got questions for James or Suraj, remember you can post those on Slido and we'll get to those in just a minute. But first of all, Alia, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So hi everyone, my name's Alia Ismangil. I am currently a digital communications officer at Greater Manchester Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust, a bit of a mouthful of an organisation. I actually graduated in 2018, so I still feel like a recent graduate, and it's a bit surreal that I'm talking on this panel at the minute.
And critically, you graduated from this program, yes, didn't you? Yes. I remember you very well as a student.
Yes, and yeah, I remember Doran's lectures very fondly and very well. So straight after I graduated, I did a Manchester Graduate Talent internship. I'm not sure if that's still what it's called, but they're sort of 1-year-ish internships around the University of Manchester in different departments and different roles. So I did mine as a digital media intern at the Faculty of Medicine, Biology and Health, so the same faculty that the psychology department is in. So I did a 10-month internship there, and from there I actually started at Greater Manchester Mental Health as a marketing and communications assistant. So it's very much sort of an assistant role for the communications team. And then 8 months into that, it just so happened that this role opened up, and I've been here ever since. And I kind of knew that I didn't want to practice psychology at the time. And I wanted to use sort of my writing skills, and was very interested in social media and digital media, which is why I sort of pursued this route. But yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and lovely to see you flourishing, and watching you develop from a distance, from that undergraduate right through to where you are now. And last but not least, Cheyenne, is that how I pronounce your name?
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne.
Don't worry. So I'm a senior account manager at a comms and advertising agency called Creative Concern. I've only actually been here for 6 weeks, but my main role is managing projects such as communications projects, brand, research for a range of clients, which all our clients focus on social responsibility, so charities, universities, but then also some government organisations too. So it's mainly like third sector. To get here, I very similar to sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Alia, is it? Yeah, Alia. I also did an MGT internship, but in the student recruitment and marketing team, as a student communications and marketing intern. So I dealt with prospectuses and helped with the email schedule that goes out to students when they're thinking of coming to the university. So I obviously learned a lot of communications and marketing skills there. And from that, I stayed at the university, joined the alumni relations teams as a comms officer, where I did quite a similar role. Did lots of marketing, emails, and social media strategy stuff, but also engagement campaigns to engage alumni around the world and promote events and volunteering opportunities. So have had most of my career at the University of Manchester and only recently just left. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, really interesting stuff. So if I just head over to Slido then and have a look at what's popular on there. So the most popular question is, and again, just put your hand up if you want to answer this question, but do I need any other qualifications, or will my psychology degree be enough? And how competitive are careers in marketing? Suraj, how about we come to you? That one. Oh, I think you're on mute. Thanks.
Sorry about that. There's been so many times where I forget to unmute. So sorry about that. Yeah, just in terms of competition, it's a tough one actually, because I would say that it's very much a employees market when it comes to tech and digital. I don't know if people would agree with that, but then at the same time, there's also a digital skills shortage. So yeah, in terms of qualifications, I'm not answering this question very well, but I would say probably, I don't have any specific Chartered Institute of Marketing qualifications, for example, but that might be something that you'd want to go for. For me, I would say that it's experience over anything. So, getting your foot in the door would be the best way forward is my advice.
Okay, James, you're sort of nodding along. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I think very similar. I think that you don't necessarily need more than the degree. I think showing the interest, for me, from the insights market research area, it's that getting stuck in, I suppose, is the key thing, right? It's those first experiences that are really important. And I saw the question further down, which is how did you get those experiences? But I think it is really key is the experience, because, I've got someone working in my team in insights who trained as a pharmacist. But what she has is a natural curiosity around people and what they do and what makes them tick. And that is actually what's interesting to me, rather than lots of additional qualifications on top of that. So yeah, I think, and a competitive, I mean, from my point of view in insights, we struggle to find really good people at the moment. It's a difficult market, but it is quite competitive when you get to a certain level. Finding really good people in those positions is tough, and so I think there are lots of opportunities to progress, certainly in the insights area.
And I've just got a question that I think sort of pops into my head. So, are you working with data it's sort of every day and never? Are you looking, who's collecting the data? How's it being collected? Who's designing it? Those kinds of questions.
So from our point of view, it's I think if you'd asked this question a few years ago, it would all have been about data. And I think now data is almost like table stakes. You just got to have it. You've got to have enough in the business to make decisions. So we have certain members of our team who will be very data, very hands-on and very deep in running queries and building data sets. But then other people in our teams who actually rarely touch data, and what they're really doing is looking at results and building like what I call that the insights layer, the value layer on top of it. What does it mean? I always say that the role of insights people is the space between the data points. It's like when you take that and that, what's it actually telling you? No one cares it's 17%. What they want to know is, what does it mean? So I think it really varies. I can have extremely technical people building big data warehouses and data sets, and I can have people who are only interested in ethnographic and qualitative research, and they just feel people, but they all fit into the team overall because you need those different skills.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. I'm getting some private messages as well. And I think this again all fits into people trying to understand your experiences. So people are asking, what it's very hard, but what does a typical day look like? I'm sure there isn't a typical day, and I can imagine that that's what you're going to say. But can you kind of give us an idea of what you do? So obviously some of your job titles, perhaps to our audience, sound very kind of technical and a bit jargony. So maybe I really like, James, that you explained that you're the bit between sort of data and kind of the implications of that. If we just go to Alia first, and then we'll work back towards the boys after Cheyenne.
Yeah, so typical day. As Dorian rightly said, it does change a lot. But so I'm part of quite a small communications team for a really big mental health trust. So what the trust do, we provide mental health service, NHS mental health services basically, and our communications team itself does pretty much everything to do with telling people what's going on. So it could be internally for staff. A big part of my job is sort of collating things that staff want to shout about to other staff and putting it on our internal staff intranet, which is just like a website that's only staff can access. I also have oversight over our external website, sort of writing articles for that and maintaining the information on that. And then a huge part of my job is running the social media for our trust. So a lot of my day will look like checking over all of our social media channels, seeing if we've got any questions or people raising concerns directly to us. And then it's also looking ahead to any awareness campaigns that we could sort of get involved with, and planning a social media plan and strategy for the coming weeks or months. And really, we get loads of requests from different staff to support with campaigns that they're running or things that they want to get out there in terms of what their service is getting involved with or doing. So yeah, I don't think I really said a typical day, but I tried to explain what we as a communications team does, because we're a small team, we sort of help each other with all our roles. And
it sounds really diverse, and it sounds like the overarching thing there is about informing others, whether that's internal, external, or somewhere in the middle of that. Yeah. Okay, so Cheyenne.
So mine's quite similar in that every day is a bit different. So I'll probably talk you through the process as I deal with the job. So because we're client facing, I'll be working with communications and marketing teams in lots of different organizations. So the way that works is they'll come to us with a problem, whether that's like they need a new brand, or they need to promote an event, or they need to come up with a new engagement communications campaign. So I will work with the client to really understand what they actually need, and maybe put on some workshops to understand that problem more, or understand their audience more, and talk to my team and formulate a solution in a way that we can help them overcome that problem, whatever that is. And if it's a piece of design, I'll work really closely with our designers and brief them in a way that it will meet the client's needs and make sure that the design is on track and what the client has in mind. If it's a focus group, I'll organise and facilitate that focus group and talk to people and get those results. And yeah, like I say, as it's so many different projects, it really varies from project to project. Sometimes I'm not just working with designers, sometimes it's also our digital team because it's a web project, and they need more complicated stuff there. I haven't actually worked on the digital project yet, so I've got that to come. But a lot of it is working with designers and making sure that whatever is in the client's mind is like well communicated to them, and feeding back to our designers on how we can improve in certain areas. And then just communicating with the client to make sure it's on the right track and is exactly what they want. And then sometimes it's coming up with a schedule after that, so scheduling the comms into their social media and sometimes posting them as well. So it's really varied, and what I do day to day depends on what stage I am at each project, because I'm working with so many different clients. I can be at like 12 different stages at the same time. So a lot of it is like checking through my to-do list and being like, where am I at on this job? And then having to like plan my day there.
It sounds like multitasking and project management is kind of part of what you're
it's all project management really, and just organizing my time and organizing other people's time as well, making sure we're not overloading designers, managing budgets as well, because obviously in an agency a big thing is making sure that you're not over servicing a client, and you're making sure that we're not spending too much time on a certain project or over delivering, and making sure that we're charging the right amount for our time, which is having moved from an in-house marketing team to now working in an agency is something that I'm having to get my head around, is like how much time does a design piece need to take and stuff. So if you are interested in working in an agency after work, as opposed to working in-house in a marketing team, that's something that's a bit different. Is a lot more finance heavy, a lot of working out how much something is going to cost a client, which is obviously something as an in-house team doesn't really have to think about as much.
Okay, brilliant. James, a typical day, and also if we just move on to the next question, maybe you can comment on sort of salary potential. So quite a few questions coming in here about can you give me any advice for someone who, also before we get to that one, can you discuss salary potential for market research? Which areas, which aspects, which companies are most valuable?
Yeah, so do you want me to cover quickly the normal day as well, normal responsibility? Yeah, so so my team are very involved in, as I said, we're dividing into two businesses. So a normal day, we're involved a lot at the moment at looking at the future of the new business, so future strategy, and trying to understand consumers in different ways. So what we're looking at the moment is in the category of people who suffer from pain, understanding what that means to them kind of psychologically in their experiences, and looking at lots of different pieces of research in that area. We're also planning for our internal marketing conference. So my team are scoping out, what are we going to deliver there in February, and how are we going to inspire and excite all of the marketeers in the business around the work that we're doing. So lots of different kind of internal or external projects that we're running.
James,
but the day is really managing this. Yeah.
Can I butt in, because I'm so interested? So you were saying that you're doing this work around pain, and there's obviously an academic literature out there about pain. Do you tend to draw on that, or do you tend to do your own kind of research with particular questions? And do you have any sense?
Yeah, it's both. It's both. So we draw on the academic work, but then we really want to understand, the psychological impacts of pain. It's such a varied and personal thing. and understanding how people manage it. So we did a great thing where we introduced all of our senior leadership to actually have hour-long conversations with normal people who suffer, because there's a whole thing about, one of our roles is to build empathy in the organization. Business is business, right? There's the numbers, there's the profits and everything else, and somehow we've got to punch through and understand that there's people that you can actually help at the center of this. And yes, we are a business, right? But that doesn't mean that there isn't a room for it. So I think one of the moves from market research is more towards that, creating empathy and creating understanding of consumers and people. So I think that's kind of where me and my team are sitting at the moment, is trying to drive that in the business. But the day is, similar to the others. There's, that actually breaks down into something like 15 different projects or streams. And it's all about managing those and checking what's being delivered when, and bringing in all the relevant stakeholders, and partly playing the politics, because you've got the marketers versus the insights versus the data. That's always a part of it. But yeah, it's not. I mean, lots of people, when they think of market research, they think it's all about numbers and clipboards, and there's some quite dated images, and it's just not anymore. It's much more about understanding motivations and going beyond that for people. In terms of salary expectations, I mean, the bigger research agencies taking on research executives. I mean, I don't know the details, but if I was going to take a guess, I think that starting salary, salaries are probably around, I think anywhere. Well, let me go back actually. Let's talk about some concrete. So I'm going to go back about 4 years ago when I was managing an agency. A research executive would be on anything between 25 to 35, or actually 18 to 35. And a senior research executive could go from 30 to 40. And then you start to go into 45, then you start to go into the more team management roles and everything else. And then that will vary hugely depending on the business, right? There's quite a lot of areas where I think opportunities in the research space are capped, in the sense of, you look at some very senior roles and the salaries are not actually that high. But it all depends on how much the company values insight. And really, that's the key thing, was when you look at a business that has insight as just someone who generates the numbers and the dashboards, you'll tend to find quite low salaries and quite low possibilities for evolution. Whereas when you look at businesses who talk about, even in their their reports or their presentations, you talk about understanding consumers or consumer centric, that's when you'll start to see more opportunities, because you work more in partnership with marketing, you have more interaction with stakeholders. So I'd say it's really about looking at the language that companies are using and how much emphasis they put on it, whether it's back office, a cost center, or whether it's a value driver. And I think when it's a value driver, I think there are, we work in partnership with the CMO. My boss is on the marketing leadership board of the company. There are senior roles in the insight sphere. So, but it is just about finding the right fit. Because you'll see some very senior roles that aren't particularly high. So yeah, find the right company would be my suggestion.
Brilliant, thank you. And Suraj, is there anything you wanted to add or comment on?
Yeah, just in terms of in terms of typical day, or in terms of the salary side of things?
Either, yeah, you can tell us both, or you can add to one or the other.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that with marketing, it's very broad. And a head of marketing at one business could be doing a totally different job to a head of marketing at another business. In terms of my role, I like to split it out into 3 different aspects. So it's very much branding, comms, and campaigns. So from the branding side, it's working with our designer on design identity and rolling out a new brand. That's something that we're working at the moment. And all the experiences that go around alongside with the brand. So onboarding new staff, onboarding new customers, all of that sort of stuff. In terms of the comm side of things, so this is almost like the glue that holds marketing together for me. So this is like communicating internally and externally, all of our emails, all of our case studies. So working with some of the airlines that we have as customers to get sign off on case studies and stats, everything like that. Then the campaign side is very much business development led. So working with the sales team, planning for events, webinars, running paid social campaigns to generate new leads and all of that sort of stuff. So that's what I would say. There is no typical day for me. It's very much working on those areas. And from an insights point of view, things like website and social media stats, market research for specific products and competitors and all of that sort of stuff plays a big part in that.
Okay, brilliant. In the interest of time, perhaps just put your hand up if you want to answer this particular question, but can you give any advice for someone who wants to work in market research or marketing but hates social media? Is that possible? Okay, Cheyenne, and then Aliyah.
So I don't enjoy social media much at all. And that it was a big part of my job in my last role. I managed 3 social media accounts, and a big part of it is actually like strategy, and I didn't find that too bad. Like getting into the reasons why people follow you on those social media accounts and really targeting content that would speak to them. And I found that quite interesting. It kind of linked to my psychology background and interest in people and how they tick. But like thinking up captions, posting every day, like it is a huge job, and it is a big part of your job if there's social media involved in the job description. Like people are like, oh, social media is so easy, but actually if you're managing 3 accounts, it can take up your entire role. And really it did drive me insane a little bit, because I really excelled in other areas of the job, and that's where I put a lot of my energy. And then I always felt like a bit of a failure when it came to social media. It did get me down. So I think if you really avidly hate social media, just be careful when you're looking at job descriptions. If it's saying that you're going to have to do social media alongside loads of other types of communications, then social media is actually a big job and you will have to put a lot of time into it. So maybe try and avoid them because you might not enjoy it. But there are so many other forms of communications and marketing that it's easy to find roles that aren't social media focused, especially nowadays that social media marketing teams are recognizing that they need a social media specific officer. So usually it'd be their role to look after social media. So you'd work closely with them on campaigns and stuff, because social media is such an integral part of comms and marketing now. But your whole job wouldn't rely on it. So I think just be vigilant when you're looking at job descriptions and ask questions in interviews about that. But it's also one of the reasons why I came to work in an agency, was so I wouldn't have to work on social media like every day-to-day management of accounts and stuff. Whereas now I do work on social media campaigns, but it's more the back end, like working with the designers on the creative and or working on the audience testing and understand the audience. So it's a part of social media that I did actually enjoy. So if you really, it is possible. Like if you really want to avoid social media, maybe seek out agency life or more market research. There are tons of roles out there that don't involve social media. Just be wary when you're looking at like job descriptions, because especially at entry level, a lot of it will be like day-to-day posting on social media. So just be careful when you're looking at job applications.
Aliyah, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, totally agree with Cheyenne. As an in-house communications team, social media is a little part of everybody's jobs, but it's mostly mine. So it's a lot of my job. And I will say I do have a love-hate relationship with social media on a personal level. I'm not on it very much personally, but I find that doing it in a professional capacity is a lot different. Like Cheyenne said, you're posting as the organization and you're looking at it as how people respond to the content of that organization. And so it's very different to posting on it personally and getting those likes or not likes or comments and things like that. I will say it is very taxing. You get complaints, you get negative comments that you have to deal with. But as Cheyenne said, there are loads of roles that don't involve it directly. So even on my team, we've got an external communications officer that normally just deals with the media and press releases and the press and statements. And she'll maybe want to use social media as part of a press campaign, but she'll come to me and say, this is what we want to get out. And I'll do the nitty gritty of writing the copy and posting it and finding image or content to go with it. So even in an in-house thing, you can avoid being directly involved with social media. But I will say, I wouldn't let your personal hate or reservations of your experience of social media on a personal capacity necessarily affect it doing it on a job level, because I do find it's very different.
Okay, brilliant. I'm going to move on unless anyone else wants to desperately add anything. No. Okay, so for job interviews, should prospective candidates collate a sort of portfolio on specific projects they've worked on, or should they focus on kind of wider transferable skills? James or Suraj, if you want to have a go at that.
I'll let you go first, James.
And I was being polite, thinking I was speaking too much already, but happy to go first. I mean, from my point of view, where I'm at GSK, we focus on competency-based interviews, and it's actually something I believe in as well, which is I'd much rather you show me how you use skills and how you've demonstrated it than you give me lots of, theory or past experience out of context. So I'd say it's really thinking about, if you look at job descriptions, what are they looking for, and finding relatable experiences, right? And you won't have them immediately. My first job I went for, I managed a bar in Manchester. But I managed to relate that into how important it was to understand consumers and people and what I learned from it, and try and find those mini case studies from within it, and from previous experience I had where I had to deal with complaints or difficult situations. It's more about finding where you've shown those skills even out of context for those first roles. And if you have been doing in parallel internships or other jobs, then of course find relevant examples. But for me, that's much more important. I don't think you really get the opportunity in interviews anymore to go through a list of things that you've done. I mean, generally people ask for a quick fly past, and then they get into, and what would you do in this situation, and how would you manage this? So I'd say relevant experiences, think about even lateral thinking, experiences that could, at a stretch, at a push, relate to the job description. And I think that has more impact than, the theory or other things. So yeah, that'd be my view.
Yeah, I'd say that's spot on. There's always going to be a job description as well, and usually the manager will work questions towards that job description. So as long as you've got something relatable to back up your answers, it doesn't have to be exact marketing research or anything like that. Like James said, it can just be something that completely non-marketing related but relevant to the answer. It's always good to back up what you're saying.
For the companies that you're currently working for, is there any sort of in-house training? I mean, are you looking to mold people, or are you looking for people to really come with many of the skills that you need so they can sort of hit the ground running?
From my point of view, we have an academy. We have a whole that I've been setting up over the last couple of years, which is to develop the skills. Because the reality is, the sector is moving so fast that there are people with 10 years experience in the sector who will have just as much experience as you do in some of the new methodologies and approaches. So I don't think you can get away. It's a great advantage is that it's moving quick. So you've also, I'd say, look for companies who will help you stay up and stay ahead of the game, because you want to be moving forwards. You don't want to join somebody who is very wedded to old ways of doing things. If, as per the previous questions, you're interested in progression, higher salaries and more responsibility, I'd say look for companies on that trajectory, because you've got to invest in people right now. I said 2 years ago, if I'd been speaking to you, I'd have been speaking all about data and that, data driven, and now we're talking about insights fueled. things move quick. So yeah, I say you there's learning on the job. There's companies that have schemes. There's companies like the Market Research Associations, like the Market Research Society, who offer training, especially to young graduates. Jump on those opportunities. I'm sure there's even free stuff that they have. ESOMAR as well, another association. Grab those things and just see what you can learn from that as well.
Are there any key recent publications in the area, or I don't know, sort of key introductions to marketing, or is it all going to be very kind of pseudo flaky stuff? Is it possible to, that if the people listening right now wanted to read up a little bit, is there anything they should be looking at, do you think? Suraj?
Yeah, I think it depends entirely on what part of marketing you want to go into, what field. But so, even compared to 10 years ago, there's so many resources online, free resources, even YouTube. There's so much to learn from. It's just about having an understanding of what field you want to go into in particular.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. I'm a first year student. What do you suggest I do to make my CV look good? Any specific volunteering or any specific activities? Cheyenne?
So I think any experience where it's like relatable to comms and marketing at all is handy. So in my final year, I panicked and I was like, oh no, I don't have any experience whatsoever in comms and marketing and I really want to work in it. But like over summer, I was working like 5 days a week in a dog kennels and I was like, well, I'm not going to get it here. So I dropped one of the days and I found a local museum and volunteered there 1 day a week, just doing social media and newsletters. And I tell you now, I did barely anything. I maybe did like 1 or 2 posts on Twitter. And like I made a newsletter which the comms officer then changed the entire content of, and then I went to one strategy meeting where I said nothing. But like these are all things that I could take it in and talk about it in interviews, and I talked about it a lot in interviews and managed to get myself into my first job. So I think if you can find any relatable experience, it really does help, because you do have that little thing on your CV that looks quite good, and you can like not lie, but like just talk about how you've had that experience, and also you can relate it back to your degree as well. So because I did psychology, I had a really in-depth knowledge of people and how they work and how to influence behavior, and then I took these ideas and used them at a strategy meeting for the museum where I lived. Yeah, there's ways that you can talk about things in interviews that really come across to people that are interviewing you, and also that combined with research into the industry. So I use Google a lot just to read up on the drum. That's a really good resource. Just read up on current trends on the drum about what's going on in the sector, and all of this knowledge that you take from your degree, any experience you can get, and online, you'll be able to sound like you know what you're talking about in interviews. And then, yeah, it's not faking it, but it's learning a lot from like the little bits you can get.
Absolutely, sort of tailoring what you have got to whatever it is, and using it as a sort of case study, a vignette, something you can talk about in an interview situation. What you said about psychology is really interesting, because that's really the next question. So how does a psychology degree fit into the world of marketing? Cheyenne?
Well, just like continuing on from what I said before, I think the employers that have been most impressed by like what I've had to talk about is when I've linked my degree to the job. And understanding people is such an important thing in communications marketing. Firstly, because of audiences. Obviously, the whole thing is understanding your audience, understanding what communications will speak to them, understanding the insights you get from whatever research that is into that audience. And every campaign that we do is based off of any audience insight we can get. So having a psychology degree really gives you that intel. And on a day-to-day basis, just like dealing with colleagues, like I deal with a lot of clients, and I think it just makes you more aware of what could be going on in their own lives. It could be influencing their behavior and like making them behave in certain ways. So I think it really helps your like social interactions in work, as well as like your actual applied psychology knowledge to the job. So I think when I've talked about this in interviews, it has really impressed employers, especially when there's a question like, what makes you different to other applicants or anything like that. Like a psychology degree is something you can really talk about. And it's different because it's not a marketing degree, it's something else. And it's something that makes you different and stand out to other applicants.
Okay, brilliant. James?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think when I spoke about how we're transitioning, our business is founded around, we call it deeper human understanding now. And the deeper bit comes from understanding psychology, behavior, and all those things, right? It's the stuff we don't have today. Up until now, it's data that's collected and then survey-based data, right? If you're going to massively, what people say is not what they do. I don't say that to this group, but the entire research industry is founded on that premise for the last, 80 years. Even a company like Amazon that has data coming out of its ears is much more into psychology and behavior and nudge and all these things now. So I would say I would value someone with psychology somewhere in their background, more than someone who only had marketing in their background right now, because you have to understand the why a lot better. So yeah, I'd say absolutely.
This group definitely know about the attitude behavior gap because I've been talking about it non-stop this week. So yeah, Suraj.
Yeah, there's a I wouldn't say it's a trend, but there's a focus in the tech industry, growth hacking. So a big part of that is how do you get a massive amount of people to basically buy your product, or use Deliveroo, or use Uber, or whatever. And when you use Uber, for example, they'll send you a code at a certain point in time, and that will usually be segmented based on how you behave, how you interact, and a lot of psychology themes and elements. So yeah, psychology is interwoven within marketing, totally.
And Alia.
I will also say, just especially this program, psychology degree, I found it really useful that we look at data and also then translate that into lab reports or writing, and that's something that I know that people I've worked for have really valued, because I feel like a lot of people that go into communications maybe have writing degrees or degrees that don't really look at data as much, but I use data a lot in evaluation of how a social media campaign has gone. And we've just finished a recruiting campaign which uses paid advertising on Facebook, and we used audience data to inform the campaign, but also to evaluate how it went and how it can improve. So having both the numbers and the writing part of it, and the understanding of how the numbers translate into that was really useful.
Well, that links beautifully into our next question then, which is really about the extent to which qualitative research is used or valued, as well as the quantitative stuff. James, is that something you can comment on?
I mean, I would just say that for me, the quant is kind of a given. It's what we've always done, and I think we are returning. I use back to more qual methods now. So whether it's more ethnography or digital ethnography as well, and also I still call it qual, but looking at things like social listening, and understanding what's happening there around sentiment analysis. I mean, it's data-based, but it still feels much more qualitative in its outputs and applications. So, and our focus next year, over one whole quarter, we're focusing on ethnographic and observational, because a lot of our team have become extremely reliant on quant. I call it the seatbelt and airbag approach to research, right? If the number's there, then we feel safe. So we're going much more now into ethnographic and observational as a push. And we've done some really interesting stuff. There's lots of startups out there doing some really cool stuff in this area that I think are just pushing the industry on beyond focus groups, beyond, IDIs and those kind of things. So the tech seems to be the right time for this to sort of accelerate.
Great. And talking of tech, Suraj, is there anything you wanted to sort of add to that?
I would say it depends on the scale of the business as well. If you're a business that has, 20 customers, paying you loads and for a decent service, but you only have 20 of them, then you're going to get a lot more out of your qualitative research than you are with the quantitative. But if you're a global, corporate business, then, it might not be as easy to do that.
Okay, I'm getting some private messages through. People are really interested in all of you, and they're particularly interested in things like sort of what you were like at school, and how I think they're trying to get a sense of, are you quite techie? Are you quite nerdy? Are you quite bright? Do you feel that you're just, someone who just works hard? I mean, I think they're just trying to get a sense of you. So just really quickly, like what were you like at school? Do you identify as being a little bit nerdy or not at all? Bad with numbers, good with numbers, good with qual, words, language, just a sense of like who you are. Cheyenne.
I was always terrible at maths. Numbers is not my strongest suit. I've always been a bit of a creative person, but I've never excelled fully at like drama or art or music or any of the like creative things, but I've always known that I've thought in a creative way. So I've always been a bit confused about myself, like, am I analytical, am I creative? And that's why psychology was like such a good degree for me, because you have to be creative in ways like when you're coming up with research projects, when you're like analyzing data, you need to think outside the box a little bit, but also you need to have that analytical side to you. You need to like look at numbers and think analytically. And I think that's why psychology, when I did it at A-level, was like the first, like I really felt like in my element. And I've always like liked and been interested by people, and I think that's something that's shone through from when I started doing psychology at A-level throughout my degree, and influenced my decision to go into comms and marketing. And comms and marketing, I think, also seemed like the natural choice for me, because I am in between like creative and analytical. And I'm not a designer. I could never be a designer. The stuff they do astounds me, but I know what work is good, and I can like critique work in a way that really focuses on the user and whether it speaks to audiences. So I think it kind of was a degree that really not a degree, a career that really matched my skills in that way. But I have always like struggled when it comes to like the actual like analyzing stuff myself. Like I remember I almost cried in my SPSS training at university. Like that's why I was not built in that way. And I very quickly realized that I couldn't go into research because I just couldn't do it. I'm not like a mathy analytical person in that way. So I think the strain of comms marketing that I've gone to is like kind of been very natural to me. The more organizational, like project management side.
Wonderful. That's really, really great insight. Alia?
Similar to Sharon, actually, I didn't like maths. I never liked maths. I wasn't bad at it. I did all right. But I also found that I've always loved writing, and I thought I'd wanted to be an author from a very young age. But I also have a very analytical mind. I liked English literature because of the analytics of it. But I think what drew me to psychology was my interest in people, but also being able to use numbers in a useful way and relate it. And I think that's what drew me also into the communications/marketing world. I just felt very in between, and I was interested in a lot. And that's how I was sort of confused as to what I wanted to do as a job, because I felt like I was interested in everything. And I think comms and marketing actually satisfies all of those things. You can be creative, you can be analytical, you can be more of one or more of another, and you'll find something in this industry that will fit you.
Brilliant, thank you. James?
So there's going to be a trend here. Pure maths, I was terrible. I'm not even going to say it wasn't my thing. I was terrible. Algebra, that just doesn't. My brain is not wired that way. But similar to I think what Leah was saying, when it was applied, when there was a logical like output to it, then yes, I got it. And I think for me, I don't feel like I'm in a sphere that is mathematical at all. And I think when it comes to how was I as a student, not particularly organized, would be the truthful answer. Very much spontaneous, late nights work, days before deadlines kind of thing. But actually, that's kind of just how I work. I've realized it's who I am, and I embrace it. I work on a lot of kind of innovation projects, and moving things forwards is what I enjoy. And I think that started, from then, as a student. So certainly not the most studious in terms of revising for months and months, and certainly not the most mathematical, no.
And last but not least, Suraj.
Yeah, I think very similar. I was I wasn't very good at anything. I wasn't very bad at anything. Very medium sort of basic student. But yeah, just in terms of maths and SPSS and that sort of thing, when I first learned it and started it, I absolutely hated it. But when I was interested in something, I didn't mind it at all. And that's with anything. If you find interest in something, like, my master's, for example, the degree was, the dissertation was on product placement within video games. And I was really interested, and I did a really good job with the SPSS side of things. So it's finding the interest in things, and I think the skills and everything like that will come alongside that.
Brilliant. I'm just very aware of time, and I think I'm right, Leah, who's behind the scenes somewhere, that we're now going to go into breakout rooms. Is that right? Oh, here she is.
Yeah,